I don't agree with people like the Institute for Fiscal Studies who say that this shift to a more highly taxed economy is likely to be permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent. You have to take the difficult decisions. And with Rishi Sunak, you have a Prime Minister who is willing to take those difficult decisions.
Now, the government wants to make it harder for people to claim benefits if they're not actively looking for work. The Chancellor Jeremy Hunt joins us now at our stand at the Conservative Party conference. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Asma.
So I read this morning in the Times you're planning proposals that would make it harder for people to claim benefits if they refuse to take active steps to move into work. That's a concept that we're quite familiar with. But there are already those sorts of sanctions in place. You have to show that you're doing all you can to look for work. You have to attend meetings with a work coach, etc. Or there are sanctions and you can lose benefits. So what's the difference with this announcement?
Well, what we are doing with Mel Stride is completely changing the structures that we have in place to make sure that, first of all, that we fill the million vacancies that we have, that businesses need people to try and expand, which is absolutely essential for economic growth. And we want to do that by, first of all, saying that if you do work, we're going to make it worth your while, which is why we're saying we'll increase the national living wage to over £11 an hour. That means that compared to 2010, if you're paid the legal minimum wage, you will get £9,000 a year more than you would have got in 2010. But at the same time, we've got 300,000 people who've been out of work without any illness or disability for more than a year.
And have they been sanctioned?
And what we're saying is we're going to look at the way the sanction system works, so that it's not just about process, did you turn up to the job centre, but we're making sure that those people are actively engaging with the process of getting to work, because their benefits are being paid by taxpayers. And part of the social contract, we want to have a safety net to help people who need help, but we do need to know that people are actively trying to look for work. And if we can do that, we can change the deal. And by the way, we already are. That's why unemployment has fallen by 1 million since 2010, which is very significant. But it's one example of the kind of difficult decisions that we're willing to take, Rishi Sunak and I are willing to take, in order to make sure that we have faster growth, which is what we all want if we're going to pay for public services like the NHS and our schools.
Okay, let's move on to tax, because this has been a very taxing issue so far. What is your message to the so-called growth caucus of MPs who want you to slash business taxes? You'll know, of course, that a year ago, Liz Truss's budget nearly crashed the economy. Is it too soon for some Tories to be demanding fresh tax cuts?
Well, what I would say to them is, if we want faster growth and an end to taxes ever ratcheting higher, it's possible to do that, but there are no shortcuts. At the moment, if we had big tax cuts, they would be inflationary, because we'd be putting extra money into people's pockets, they would spend it, and that would push up prices. And the fastest way that we can help struggling families now is to deliver the Prime Minister's pledge to halve inflation. That's, as he said yesterday, that's not a 1p cut in income tax, that's actually a 5p boost in incomes. But if we're prepared to take difficult decisions, to make it easier for companies to grow, to spend taxpayers' money more carefully, to reform the welfare state, as we've just been talking, then it is possible to do that. I don't agree with people like the Institute for Fiscal Studies who say that this shift to a more highly taxed economy is likely to be permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent. You have to take the difficult decisions. And with Rishi Sunak, you have a Prime Minister who is willing to take those difficult decisions.
OK, well, on the timeline then, you'll know that Michael Gove said yesterday he would like to see the tax burden reduced by the next election. Is that possible then? Because if by the next election, excuse me, Rishi Sunak does manage to halve inflation, could we then see tax cuts between those 2 points, between the target being met and the next election?
Well, you know, we would all love to see taxes cut. And as a Conservative facing an election, you know, I believe in lowering taxes. But we don't know whether that's going to be possible before the next election. At the moment, as I look at the national finances, our debt interest payments are much higher than they were in the spring budget because of long-term interest rate projections being higher. But if we're prepared to walk this difficult path, it is possible to bring down taxes, and we won't hesitate to do that, but we can't say when it will be possible to do that.
Okay, now you've spoken to the Times about setting a path to lower taxes through making a more productive state. Do we need to accept that the state has to do less?
I don't believe we do. I think we can have fantastic public services actually doing more in certain areas than they're currently doing. But we have to be prepared to take difficult decisions about the way we spend money. And if you look at the moment at, for example, the amount of time doctors and nurses spend filling out forms, what police officers have to do before a trial starts, the fact that teachers say that they spend more time on non-teaching tasks than teaching tasks, we need to have a root and branch look at the way our public servants spend their time. And obviously, ministers over the decades say we're going to improve efficiency. What's different this time? Well, first of all, the Treasury is thinking about this differently. In the past, when a department runs out of money, the Treasury has said, well, just find it, and the IT program gets cancelled. And you don't make those efficiencies. We're going to change that. But secondly, you have things like artificial intelligence, which really are changing the way things work. And Britain is a global leader. We do AI really well. We have some of the biggest AI companies in the world here, and we're going to make the most of that.
Let's talk about some public services, shall we? 3 days of joint strike action by junior doctors and consultants. I don't know if you've seen the front page of the Times today. NHS hospitals paying up to £7,900. I'll say that again because it's almost incredible. £7,900 a shift to cover striking colleagues. 2 points on that, actually. First of all, are doctors profiteering from these strikes?
Well, I find it very depressing to read those stories. I mean, that is a huge sum of money. And I think the point to say is that money that is being paid to a doctor to cover that shift is money that can't be spent on taking someone off the waiting list by giving them an urgently needed operation. And that is why these strikes are so counterproductive when it comes to patients. We've offered doctors an above-inflation pay rise. It wasn't the government's suggestion. It was a suggestion that came from an independent pay review body. But what consultants are saying, for example, is that they think that we should increase the taxes on members of the public earning less than £100,000 so we can give a higher pay rise to people earning more than £100,000. I don't think that's fair. And I think what we should do is sit around the table. They should be talking to Steve Barclay, not about pay, but about all the things that we can do together to make the NHS work better.
Of course. They would say that they are highly skilled individuals, though, and sometimes drawing a comparison between them and kind of, ordinary working people who work very hard but don't have those same skills is disingenuous.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that they are doing their job because they care about patients, the vast majority of whom are on lower salaries than they are. And I think they should ask themselves, given that we rightly have a publicly funded national health service paid through taxes, whether this is fair. And I don't believe it is.
Okay, the other point of the £7,900 is safety. Presumably hospitals are only spending this kind of money because they want hospitals to be safe. They're concerned about patient safety. Do you think it's safe to be sick in the UK this week if you have something urgent and there's a 2-week pathway, for example, when it comes to suspected cancer cases? Do you think that people will be seen?
Well, I know that hospitals are working really hard to try and protect patient safety, but what I would say is these are very extreme circumstances, and it makes it much, much harder when you're having to deal with this combined strike by junior doctors and consultants. And I don't think it's necessary. I think that Steve Barclay is very willing to talk to doctors about how to improve working conditions, how to improve the way the NHS functions in general. But we've made an above-inflation pay award in a period where not everyone has had above-inflation pay awards, in a period where public finances are very tight. I think we've been very reasonable, and I would urge doctors to come and talk to the government about the other things we can do to make their working lives better.
As a former health secretary, though, do you think it's safe this week?
Well, I think, we're getting close to the line, and I don't think we should be taking any risks at all with patient safety.
Okay. Many people believe that there's a lot of posturing going on, as there would be, I suppose, at a Tory party conference in terms of the next leader. You've someone who's had leadership ambitions in the past. Have you ruled out any future bid for the leadership of the party?
I'm pleased to say I've been completely cured of that, Asma. I've done it so many times now that I've just I can tell you. But there's a reason why. There is another reason, not just to do with Jeremy Hunt, why I've been cured of it, and that is because we have an amazing Prime Minister, and I have seen him close up. He works phenomenally hard. He has an incredible grasp of detail. And if you look, give you one example. If you look at the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was something that was hanging over the Brexit settlement, he applied himself to that, an incredibly difficult problem. He built up trust with the EU, tremendous command of detail. He solved that problem, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that problem solving as we go forward.
Okay, well, let's hope many more problems are solved. Jeremy Hunt, Chancellor, of course, thank you very much for joining us on Times Radio.
Thank you, Asma.